Hey, just saying, good work, Donald Trump, in neutralizing Iran. I don't think Australia should be involved in that war. We just don't have a lot to contribute to that specific set of operations. And in all seriousness, it's just better if it's just the Americans. Um, the next concern is like, how do you make sure that you have gotten the nuclear material? I'm sure a lot of very smart people are working on that problem. I do have concerns about the future of Iran. Maybe a solution is just to, every time they start working on something nuclear, and we're able to detect this because uh, when there's some form of radiation occurring, there's all different kinds of sensors which can pick it up. So when they start working on a nuclear weapon again or nuclear material, I suspect what can happen is that we have targeted strikes on the military assets. What I am concerned about is the creeping of targets away from what are objectively military targets towards things which are more like police stations and administrative buildings. That is something which is going to cause so much suffering to the Iranian people, which will not be necessary. What we should do is that we should hit their military targets in the future when they start developing nuclear weapons again or begin working on any form of nuclear program. We then hit those military targets and we continuously hit that. That's a way of avoiding having to have a prolonged campaign where we are trying to have regime change. The United States does not have it in it and to work towards regime change in Iran. We had Iraq, we had Afghanistan, we've had enough of this. What we can do is that we can blow up their military bases every time they do something nuclear, and that's enough of an incentive for them not to do it. They will always try and create a nuclear weapon. That's the problem. And that's my biggest fear, is that we'll be stuck in a cycle where Iran never gets to develop into a flourishing democracy, and the Iranian people are kind of having to wear the costs of the necessary military interventions to stop them from developing a nuclear weapon. Doing that, like the point of everything we do needs to be the flourishing of the Iranian people, not just disarmament. Uh, it it's a watch this space kind of thing, but repeated uh, demolition of military buildings and military infrastructure each time there is a suspicion that they are developing a nuclear weapon may be enough of an incentive for the Iranians to decide not to pursue a nuclear program again. That's my hope. There's always this hope with a concept called air power. Like, I know that that phrase has as a civilian, most civilians, when they hear that, they'll think, oh yeah, that's self-explanatory. But no, air power is actually a doctrine, and it has a specific meaning. And the idea is that you don't need to have troops on the ground. The idea of air power is that you can hit all of their targets without needing any of that. And the idea originally was that the people will become demoralized. The people never become demoralized. When we're talking about giving up on a war, maybe they will, the military will not so much be demoralized, but be smart and realize that if they work towards nuclear capabilities, that they're going to get the bejeebers bombed out of them. Okay, so don't think of it as demoralizing the enemy, just as an incentive. Like, you do this, you get the stick. Okay, but we need to be very careful not to have target creep and begin hitting civilian targets and civilian infrastructure. There is not going to be a regime change in Iran from this. It's going to be very unlikely. Uh, put plainly, they've just got a very good bureaucracy. Like, I'm going to go to reference uh, the highest authority in military studies, the TV series Battlestar Galactica. In Battlestar Galactica, the person who ends up being the person who leads humanity was the education minister, because every other minister and member of the executive arm of their government died on Earth when the Cylons attacked them. The Cylons are these evil robot people, right? Okay, it's the same thing going on in Iran at the moment. You keep, like, if you destroy their leader, their military leaders, there's just going to be another military leader to replace them. That's the entire point of having the command and control structure in the military. You destroy their defense minister, well, they'll just have another minister walk into it. And more than that, they're going to get better and better at this hopping between roles, and they're going to train people to do several roles above them. Okay, and a big part of leadership is just being the person in the room who's comfortable giving instructions. So it the trans like whilst it's they're going to be somewhat paralyzed in their ability to respond to things, because they're constantly going to be going through that stage of forming, norming, storming, performing, and they're going to be locked at that forming stage, where people are constantly walking into jobs and not really knowing how to do it. They and they're still going to be organized enough to be able to for people to know who's in charge. The caveats to that, there's going to be a lot of confusion at their end as well, because they're getting the bejeebers bombed out of them and people are dying. So there is going to be confusion. But we're talking about over the long term here, okay? Like, at the moment, the Americans have had a massive win. I think Trump now knows what it's like to be a wartime president, and I'm hoping this rubs him in the right way. And I hope he starts looking at the situation in Ukraine and begins thinking to himself, I really like this. I like destroying people who are harming others. Maybe I can do this to Putin, right? Because that's the person he needs to do this to, right? He needs to put as many assets in Ukraine as possible and do everything he can to assist the Ukrainians. There are other wars which need to be sorted out in the world. It's not all about peace. Sometimes violence is required. Now, the place where violence is required most in the world outside of Iran is in Ukraine. And I sincerely hope Donald Trump goes from his win in Iran and then looks to Ukraine as the next theatre of operations that he can passionately be involved in. Because so far he's been a little bit limp-wristed with it, really. I'm not suggesting that American troops should be in Ukraine. I'm not saying they shouldn't, right? Russia is a nuclear power, let's remember that. But working towards victory for the Ukrainians over the Russians is necessary. And I'm hoping that Donald Trump has got a taste for this, right? I hope this situation has actually excited him. I'm not saying that I'd say this to every US president, but Donald Trump, I'd prefer you to be a war president rather than the peace president. Let's win in Ukraine. Let's destroy the Russians. Let's get a victory for the Ukrainian people. Let's get this done. Have a good evening, everyone.